And welcome back to Newsbeat African Mirror, something we do every week on Matters Africa. This week we discuss the Africa Energy Summit, a feasible vision or a pipeline dream. This is a big one. Online, Dr. Paul Kariuki, Executive Director, Democracy Development Program at the University of KwaZulu Natal and convener at the African Policy Circle. Dr. Paul Kariuki, welcome to African Mirror.
Thank you so much, Shafiq, for having me. And good afternoon to your listeners.
And kicking off straight away, this initiative, the African Development Bank and the World Bank working together, and the aim is to electrify 300 million Africans on the continent. This certainly is a refreshing headline after all of Trump's activities, because a lot of Trump's activities are pretty much anti-economy in the developing world. But here we see something like this rising to the fore. What do you make of it?
I think you're right, because the fact that we have some positive thing to look up to after, the presidency of President Trump, and of course the recent happenings taking place in DRC. We need to find stories that inspire us and make us to believe in the African dream. So this commitment that has been made after this energy summit is one of the positive stories that I think the continent yearns for, even as we begin the year. Because the truth be told, there is more than 300 million Africans who do not have access to electricity. And for most of African countries that are enjoying more than 60 years post-independence, it is not a good story to tell in that way. So I think finally there is some commitment that is more practical like this time around, when we saw this summit being convened in Tanzania in partnership with the African Union, the African Development Bank and the World Bank, bringing together all key actors from broad-based sectors to come to solve this one big challenge that kind of stops the African continent from really realizing its economic growth potential, and at the same time also provide a very much needed human right, especially on our continent, and that is provision and access to affordable electricity. So from that point of view, is a welcomed initiative.
It's massive. I mean, 300 million is a lot of people. And there's something else that comes out of this, which shows that we are doing something positive about climate change, because part of the briefing is something called clean cooking solutions, because once these households have access to electricity, it means that deforestation and the cutting down of trees will decrease, which means that parts of the continent will reforest themselves and re-energize the environment, something which Trump is certainly not doing.
Very true. I agree, and I appreciate the fact that you brought in the idea of the clean cooking methodologies and energy provisions. It's very true that we have, as a continent, suffered from adverse climate change situation because of deforestation. But part of that is because majority of these 300 million people that this summit was looking at rely on charcoal as their primary source of energy for their households. So the more we get to a place where we can even replace that kind of a reliance, the better for the well-being of households, number one, but also for our environment, in which now we can reduce the rate of deforestation and promote more cleaner, renewable energies, which is one of the main outcomes of this summit as the way forward. So I think it's very important to underscore that this opportunity that provides this continent with, in providing clean cooking solutions that are not relying on coal and other means of energy production that really do harm our environment, especially at this time. So it's a good move towards mitigating deforestation and reducing CO2 emissions that really impact our environment negatively, and while at the same time also focusing on improving overall health and economic growth from the household level to the entire economy of our country.
And of course, this is an ambitious rollout. It wants to get everything done by 2030. And I think that's the best way of doing things. Make it as sharp and as fast as possible, because there is a need. And if we get even half of this done by 2030, it's going to make a significant difference. But I like the targets they're setting themselves.
Yes, definitely. Because firstly, it has to be an initiative that can be measured in terms of its progress, and secondly, in terms of delivery. And I think they have ticked these two boxes primarily to show that there is enough commitment from different African countries that even went to the summit already with their draft energy compact plans, which already shows that there is a serious political will towards making this goal realized. And hopefully the remainder of the countries that have not even thought through their energy plans will be motivated by those who went to the summit already prepared and came up with this plan so that they can, give traction to the summit outcomes. That's the first thing. The second thing, of course, is to ensure that this project does not go the way of other African projects that have, unfortunately, and to our shame as a continent, most of these ambitious projects don't see the end. They start well with a lot of commitment and hype around them, and then in between the signing of commitments, or what we call now the declaration, to the point where they were supposed to end, there is something that goes off wrong. And those are things that I think it's important to mention for our listeners to know, so that we can also, as a public, the African public, can hold our governments to account. And that, number one, is to ensure there is proper resource management. This is a lot of money that is being put into this kind of a project, $90 billion US. If some of this money will be lost because of mismanagement, corruption, and bad governance, and all the things that we've been talking about on this show, it will be such a pity. And of course, pulls our continent backwards. So we need to be vigilant as a citizenry on the continent to ensure that whatever commitments are made, firstly, they are made public. We got to know what is our country signing. And secondly, we got to watch the spending as African public. And thirdly, we must emphasize delivery, not just plans to sit on papers or to sit in different departments that are not talking to each other, because we've seen this kind of stories where there is a poor intergovernmental coordination. And that makes it very easy for resources to be misused and to be misspent, even in certain situations, underspending. So we need to be vigilant on those things. And also we need to be vigilant around the reporting. We need to demand ongoing progress reporting, not to wait until when there is another summit to talk about the challenges that could have been alleviated or even addressed before a summit was held, to give us, kind of a feedback on the progress that is being made. And lastly, and which is, I think, in my view, more importantly, engage local citizenry. Let the citizens be at the center of the delivery of this project.
Indeed. Unfortunately, we have to leave it there. And of course, just quickly to outline, two outcomes are wanted by Mission 300 to electrify 300 million Africans by 2030, the Dar es Salaam Energy Declaration, and the National Energy Compact from all the different countries. Really nice to do a good news story. And Dr. Paul Kariuki, thanks to you, Executive Director, Democracy Development Program at the University of KZN and convener at the Africa Policy Circle. Next week, same thing, different subject.
Thank you so much, Shafiq, for having me on the show.